Millionaire invited the black cleaning lady as a joke, but she showed up like a diva and everyone. The golden invitation card felt heavy in Amara Washington's weathered hands as she stood in the supply closet of the Sterling Tower, Manhattan's most prestigious corporate building. For 3 years, she had cleaned these marble floors every single night, invisible to the wealthy executives who walked past her as if she were a ghost. But tonight, everything would change. The title of this story, Millionaire invited the black cleaning lady as a joke, but she showed up like a diva and everyone, would become the most talked about scandal in New York's elite circles. Marcus Sterling, the 38-year-old CEO of Sterling Industries, had handed her the invitation yesterday with a cruel smirk that made her stomach turn. His friends had been watching from the executive lounge, their laughter echoing through the hallway like broken glass. They thought it was hilarious to invite the 42-year-old cleaning lady to the most exclusive charity gala of the year. What they didn't know was that Amara had been waiting for this moment for 15 years, carrying secrets that would shake the foundation of everything Marcus had built on lies and betrayal. The morning sun painted the skyscrapers of Manhattan in shades of gold and amber as Amara stood before her modest apartment mirror, transforming herself into someone the world had forgotten existed. Her daughter, Destiny, watched from the doorway with wide eyes as her mother pulled out a dress from a sealed garment bag that had been hidden in the back of their closet for over a decade. The emerald green gown shimmered like liquid jewels, its designer label still pristine despite the years. Destiny had never seen her mother look so determined, so fierce, as if she was preparing for battle rather than a party. Amara's fingers trembled slightly as she fastened the diamond necklace around her neck, real diamonds that had once belonged to her grandmother, a woman who had built an empire from nothing before it was stolen by those who thought they deserved it more. The transformation was remarkable, from the woman who scrubbed toilets and emptied trash cans to someone who looked like she had stepped out of a fashion magazine. But this wasn't about vanity or proving she could look the part. This was about reclaiming what had been taken from her family through deception, manipulation, and corporate theft that had destroyed her father's legacy and left them with nothing but memories and hidden evidence that she had been collecting for years. Marcus Sterling stood at the entrance of the grand ballroom at the Plaza Hotel, greeting his guests with the confidence of a man who believed he was untouchable. His wife, Catherine, sparkled beside him in a dress that cost more than most people's annual salary, her fake smile as polished as her jewelry. The cream of New York society filtered through the doors, each one more wealthy and influential than the last. Investment bankers, senators, celebrity entrepreneurs, and old money families who traced their wealth back generations. Marcus had invited them all to witness what he thought would be the ultimate display of his power and superiority. He had even hired photographers from major society magazines to capture what he called a lesson in knowing your place. His best friend, Jonathan Cross, leaned over and whispered with anticipation, asking if Marcus really thought the cleaning lady would show up. Marcus laughed, assuring him that he had made sure she understood the invitation was mandatory if she wanted to keep her job. The cruelty of it made several nearby guests chuckle, though some shifted uncomfortably at the obvious mean-spiritedness of the joke. What none of them realized was that every cruel word, every mocking laugh, was being recorded by hidden microphones that Amara had strategically placed throughout the ballroom during her late-night cleaning shifts over the past month. The ballroom fell into a stunned silence when Amara Washington walked through the grand entrance at exactly 8 o'clock in the evening. She didn't shuffle in with her head down as they had expected. She glided across the marble floor with the grace of a ballet dancer, her emerald gown catching the light from the chandeliers and creating an almost ethereal glow around her. Her hair, usually hidden under a work cap, was styled in an elegant updo that showcased her graceful neck and the stunning diamond necklace that caught everyone's attention. The transformation was so complete that for a moment, nobody recognized her. Marcus actually started to approach her, thinking she was some important guest he had forgotten to greet personally. But then recognition dawned on his face, and his confident smile faltered. The cleaning lady he had invited as entertainment for his cruel joke looked like she belonged there more than half his invited guests. Catherine grabbed her husband's arm, hissing under her breath about what kind of game this woman was playing. But Amara wasn't playing any games. She was finally ready to reveal the truth that had been buried for 15 years, a truth that would expose Marcus Sterling as the fraud he really was and restore her family's stolen legacy. The whispers started immediately, spreading through the crowd like wildfire as people realized who had just entered their exclusive world. Patricia Vanderbilt, an heiress who prided herself on her ability to spot fake designer goods from across a room, gasped when she recognized Amara's dress as a genuine Valentino haute couture piece that had been featured in Vogue 15 years ago. How could a cleaning lady afford such a dress? Where did she get those diamonds that were clearly real and worth a fortune? The questions buzzed through the air as Amara made her way to the center of the ballroom, ignoring the stares and whispers with a dignity that made some people feel ashamed of their earlier laughter. Marcus recovered from his shock and strutted toward her with forced bravado, determined to regain control of his twisted joke. He announced loudly for everyone to hear that their special guest had arrived, the woman who kept their offices sparkling clean, and wasn't it wonderful that she could join them for this special evening? The condescension dripped from every word like poison. But Amara simply smiled, a smile that held secrets and promises of revelations to come. She thanked Marcus for the invitation in a voice that was cultured and refined, nothing like the quiet, submissive tone she had used while cleaning his office. The contrast was jarring, making several guests exchange confused glances. Jonathan Cross, emboldened by alcohol and arrogance, approached with a group of Marcus's business partners, ready to participate in the humiliation. He made a show of examining Amara's dress, asking loudly if she had rented it for the evening and how many paychecks it would take to pay it off. His wife, Linda, giggled beside him, adding that it was sweet how some people tried so hard to fit in where they didn't belong. The cruelty was casual, practiced, the kind of behavior that came naturally to people who had never faced real hardship or consequences for their actions. Amara stood perfectly still, letting them circle her like vultures, their words recorded by the devices she had hidden. When they finally stopped talking, waiting for her to crumble or run away in tears, she spoke in a clear, strong voice that carried across the entire ballroom. She thanked them for their interest in her dress and explained that it had been a gift from her father, Daniel Washington, for her 27th birthday, the last gift he gave her before Marcus Sterling destroyed his company and drove him to his death. The silence that followed was deafening. The name Daniel Washington sent shockwaves through the room. Everyone knew that name. He had been a brilliant entrepreneur who had built a technology empire from nothing, only to lose everything in what was reported as a hostile takeover by Sterling Industries 15 years ago. The official story was that Washington had mismanaged funds and that Marcus had saved the company from bankruptcy. But now, standing before them in designer clothes and real diamonds, his daughter was suggesting a very different story. Marcus's face had turned the color of ash, his hands trembling as he tried to process what was happening. This wasn't possible. He had made sure there was no connection between the cleaning lady he had hired 3 years ago and the man whose company he had stolen. All the records had been altered, the paper trail destroyed, the witnesses paid off or threatened into silence. But Amara reached into her elegant clutch and pulled out a small USB drive, holding it up for everyone to see. On this drive, she announced, was 15 years of evidence that Marcus Sterling had committed corporate fraud, identity theft, and insider trading to steal Washington technologies. There were recorded conversations, forged documents, proof of bribes to judges and regulatory officials, and most damning of all, a video confession from Marcus's former business partner who had helped orchestrate the theft but couldn't live with the guilt anymore. The crowd erupted in gasps and exclamations. Phones appeared in hands as people began recording and live-streaming the unfolding scandal. Marcus tried to snatch the USB drive, but Amara stepped back gracefully, reminding him that this was just a copy. The originals were already in the hands of the FBI, the Securities and Exchange Commission, and every major news outlet in the country. The authorities would be arriving soon to arrest him for his crimes. Catherine Sterling stood frozen in horror as she watched her entire world collapse in real time. She had always suspected her husband was ruthless in business, but she had chosen to look the other way, enjoying the wealth and status his success provided. Now she was learning that every diamond she wore, every luxury vacation they took, every private school tuition payment for their children, had been paid for with stolen money. Money that belonged to the woman who had been cleaning their toilets for 3 years. The irony was so bitter she could taste it. Some of the guests were already backing away from Marcus as if his criminality was contagious. These were people who valued their reputations above all else, and being associated with a corporate criminal would be social suicide. Patricia Vanderbilt was already on her phone with her lawyer, checking if any of her investments were connected to Sterling Industries. Jonathan Cross had gone pale, realizing that as Marcus's business partner, he might be implicated in the scandal. His wife Linda was no longer giggling, her face a mask of panic as she calculated how this would affect their social standing. Amara walked slowly toward Marcus, each step measured and deliberate. She told him that for 3 years, she had cleaned his office, listened to his conversations, and collected evidence of every crime he had committed since stealing her father's company. She had accepted every humiliation, every degrading comment, every moment of being treated as less than human, because she knew this day would come. The day when Marcus Sterling would learn that the woman he saw as beneath him was actually the rightful heir to half of everything he owned. Her father had been too trusting, too naive about the depths of Marcus's greed and cruelty. But Amara had learned from his mistakes. She had studied law at night while working multiple jobs to support herself and her daughter. She had learned patience, strategy, and most importantly, she had learned that justice might be slow, but it was inevitable if you were willing to fight for it. The FBI agents arrived exactly as Amara had predicted, their presence causing a fresh wave of panic through the ballroom. Marcus tried to run, but there was nowhere to go. As they placed him in handcuffs, reading him his rights while photographers captured every humiliating moment, he looked at Amara with a mixture of rage and disbelief. The next morning, the scandal was on the front page of every newspaper and trending on every social media platform. Millionaire invited the black cleaning lady as a joke, but she showed up like a diva and everyone. Became the headline that defined the biggest corporate scandal of the decade. The investigation that followed revealed that Marcus had stolen not just from Daniel Washington, but from dozens of other entrepreneurs over the years, particularly targeting black-owned businesses that he believed wouldn't have the resources to fight back. His empire, built on lies and theft, crumbled within weeks. Sterling Industries' stock plummeted, investors fled, and the board of directors voted unanimously to remove him even before his trial began. Catherine filed for divorce and took their children to live with her parents in Connecticut, desperate to distance herself from the shame. She tried to claim she knew nothing about her husband's crimes, but the court froze all their assets pending the investigation. The lifestyle she had enjoyed for so long evaporated like morning mist, leaving her to face the reality of who she had married and what she had chosen to ignore. Amara stood in what had been Marcus's office, now legally hers as the court had ruled in favor of her claim to Washington Technologies and all its assets that had been absorbed into Sterling Industries. The view from the top floor was spectacular, showing the city that had once crushed her father's dreams but had now witnessed justice being served. Destiny stood beside her, proud of her mother's courage and determination. They had gone from a tiny apartment in Queens to owning one of the most valuable companies in New York, but Amara knew this was just the beginning. She renamed the company Washington Industries and immediately implemented changes that Marcus would have never considered. Fair wages for all employees, especially the cleaning staff who were given substantial raises and benefits. Scholarship programs for employees' children, mentorship opportunities for young entrepreneurs from underserved communities, and a zero-tolerance policy for discrimination or harassment. The security guard who had always treated her with kindness when she was a cleaner was promoted to head of security. The other cleaning staff who had worked alongside her were offered training programs to move into whatever departments interested them. Patricia Vanderbilt and several other society women tried to befriend Amara after the scandal, suddenly interested in her story and eager to be associated with her triumph. They invited her to charity lunches and exclusive clubs, acting as if they hadn't been part of the crowd that had laughed at Marcus's cruel joke. Amara declined their invitations politely but firmly. She had no interest in joining a society that valued wealth over character, that had stood by and watched while someone they thought was beneath them was humiliated for entertainment. Instead, she started her own foundation focused on helping families who have been victims of corporate fraud and theft. She hired investigators to look into other cases similar to her father's, finding dozens of businesses that had been destroyed by predatory takeovers and working to get justice and compensation for the victims. Jonathan Cross was arrested 2 weeks after Marcus, charged as an accomplice in several of the fraud schemes. His wife Linda tried to visit Amara, begging for mercy, claiming her husband had been manipulated by Marcus. Amara listened to her plea but reminded her of the night at the gala when Linda had laughed at her, had made jokes about people trying to fit in where they didn't belong. She told Linda that her husband would face justice for his crimes, just as Marcus had, and that perhaps this experience would teach them both that treating people as less than human because of their job or their race always came with a price. Linda left in tears, her designer shoes clicking against the marble floor that Amara had once cleaned on her hands and knees. The sound echoed through the building like a reminder of how completely their positions had reversed. The trial of Marcus Sterling became one of the most watched court cases in corporate history. Amara testified with calm precision, presenting evidence that painted a picture of systematic theft and destruction spanning 15 years. She spoke about her father, Daniel Washington, a brilliant man who had built his company with integrity only to have it stolen by someone he had considered a friend. Marcus had pretended to be Daniel's mentor, gaining his trust while secretly plotting to destroy him. The jury saw emails where Marcus had laughed about how easy it was to manipulate naive idealists like Daniel. They saw forged documents that Marcus had used to convince investors that Daniel was embezzling funds. They saw the suicide note that Daniel had left, apologizing to his daughter for failing to protect their legacy, not knowing that she would spend 15 years preparing to restore it. When Amara finished her testimony, several jury members were in tears. The verdict was unanimous, guilty on all charges. Marcus was sentenced to 25 years in federal prison, the maximum sentence for his crimes. 6 months after the gala that had changed everything, Amara hosted her own charity event at the same Plaza Hotel ballroom where she had been humiliated. But this time, the guest list was very different. Instead of the old money elite who had laughed at Marcus's cruel joke, the room was filled with entrepreneurs who had built their businesses from nothing, activists fighting for economic justice, and employees of Washington Industries who were celebrating their company's remarkable transformation. The cleaning staff who worked at the plaza were invited as honored guests, seated at the best tables and treated with the respect they deserved. Amara gave a speech about resilience, justice, and the importance of never forgetting where you came from. She spoke about her father's dream of building a company that would lift up communities, create opportunities, and prove that success didn't have to come at the expense of others. She announced that Washington Industries would be dedicating 50% of its profits to funding new businesses in underserved communities, providing not just money but mentorship and support to ensure their success. Marcus Sterling spent his first night in federal prison lying on a narrow bunk, staring at the ceiling of his cell, finally understanding what it felt like to be powerless. He had lost everything: his company, his wealth, his family, his freedom, and his reputation. The other inmates knew who he was, knew what he had done, and had no sympathy for a man who had destroyed so many lives out of greed. He would spend the next 25 years paying for his crimes, but even that wouldn't undo the damage he had caused. In his cell, he kept thinking about that night at the gala, the moment when Amara had walked in looking like royalty, and he had realized too late that he had underestimated her. He had invited her as a joke, thinking he could humiliate someone he saw as beneath him, never imagining that she was playing a longer game, that she had been gathering the evidence that would destroy him. The title of the story that the media kept repeating haunted him. Millionaire invited the black cleaning lady as a joke, but she showed up like a diva and everyone now knew the truth about Marcus Sterling. Destiny Washington graduated from Columbia University with honors, her education paid for not by struggling in student loans as her mother had planned, but by the recovered fortune that was rightfully theirs. She stood at the podium giving her valedictorian speech, looking at her mother in the audience with tears in her eyes. She spoke about justice, perseverance, and the importance of never letting anyone make you feel less than you are. She talked about watching her mother work multiple jobs, seeing her come home exhausted but still helping with homework, still encouraging her to dream big even when their reality was small. She talked about the night her mother had transformed into the woman she had always been inside, walking into that ballroom with the confidence of someone who knew their worth and was ready to claim it. The audience gave a standing ovation, but Amara's eyes were only on her daughter, the next generation who would carry forward the Washington legacy with pride and integrity. The ripple effects of Amara's victory spread throughout corporate America like waves from a stone dropped in still water. Other companies began investigating their own histories, finding similar cases of stolen businesses and destroyed entrepreneurs. Laws were changed to provide better protection for small business owners against predatory takeovers. Business schools added Amara's story to their curriculum as a case study in both corporate crime and the pursuit of justice. She received speaking invitations from universities, Congress, and international business forums, but she was selective about which ones she accepted. Her priority was running Washington Industries with the values her father had originally envisioned, proving that a company could be both profitable and ethical. She hired former inmates who had served their time and needed second chances, understanding that everyone deserved the opportunity to rebuild their lives. She created apprenticeship programs that took young people from the same neighborhoods where she had struggled and taught them skills that would lift them into the middle class and beyond. Catherine Sterling tried to rebuild her life after the divorce, but the shame followed her everywhere. She had changed her name, moved to a small town in Maine, and taken a job as a receptionist at a local real estate office. It was humbling to go from being served to serving others, to worry about making rent instead of choosing between vacation homes. Sometimes she thought about Amara, about the dignity with which she had carried herself even while cleaning toilets, and felt a burning shame for how she had treated her. She had written a letter of apology but couldn't bring herself to send it, knowing that words could never undo the pain she had been complicit in causing. Her children, now teenagers, had to change schools and deal with the bullying that came from being Marcus Sterling's kids. They learned hard lessons about how their privilege had been built on the suffering of others, lessons that would hopefully make them better people than their parents had been. The employees at Washington Industries noticed the difference immediately when Amara took over. The fear-based culture that Marcus had cultivated was replaced with one of mutual respect and opportunity. The cleaning staff no longer worked in the shadows but were acknowledged and appreciated for their essential work. Several of them took advantage of the education programs Amara offered, moving into different departments and building careers they had never thought possible. The security guard who had been promoted, Thomas, became one of Amara's most trusted advisors, his years of observing the company from his post giving him insights that Harvard MBAs had missed. The company's productivity soared as employees felt valued and invested in the company's success. Innovation flourished when people felt safe to share ideas without fear of having them stolen. Washington Industries became known as one of the best places to work in New York, attracting top talent who wanted to be part of something meaningful. One evening, 3 years after the gala that had changed everything, Amara stood in her father's study, which she had recreated exactly as it had been before they lost everything. His books, his awards, his photographs, all restored to their rightful place. She held a picture of him, taken just months before Marcus had destroyed him, and spoke to it as if he could hear her. She told him that she had done it, had reclaimed their legacy and used it to help others the way he had always wanted. She told him about Destiny's graduation, about the businesses they were helping to launch, about the lives that were being changed because she had refused to accept injustice. She told him that Marcus was still in prison, would be for many more years, and that his name had become synonymous with corporate corruption. She told him that she had learned to transform pain into power, humiliation into determination, and that every single person who had laughed that night at the gala now knew that Amara Washington was not someone to be underestimated. The media never tired of the story, making documentaries and writing books about the night that changed corporate America. Millionaire invited the black cleaning lady as a joke, but she showed up like a diva and everyone became more than just a headline. It became a symbol of resistance against oppression, proof that justice could prevail even when the odds seemed impossible. Young entrepreneurs, especially women of color, looked to Amara as an inspiration, proof that they could overcome whatever obstacles were placed in their path. She received thousands of letters from people sharing their own stories of injustice, asking for advice, thanking her for giving them hope. She read every single one, responding when she could, building a network of survivors who supported each other in their fights for justice. The foundation she had started grew into a national organization, helping hundreds of families recover assets that had been stolen through corporate crime. Marcus's former friends and business associates distanced themselves from him completely, pretending they had never really known him, had never participated in his schemes or laughed at his cruel jokes. But Amara had recordings of many of them, evidence of their own smaller crimes and cruelties. She didn't pursue legal action against all of them, choosing instead to let them live with the fear that she could expose them at any moment. It was a kind of poetic justice, letting them experience just a fraction of the powerlessness that their victims had felt. Some of them tried to make amends, donating to her foundation or supporting her business ventures, hoping to earn forgiveness or at least forestall consequences. She accepted their money for the good it could do but never forgot who they really were, what they were capable of when they thought there would be no accountability. The transformation of Sterling Industries into Washington Industries became a Harvard Business School case study, but not just for the financial turnaround. It became a blueprint for how to build a company on principles of justice and equity while still being profitable. Amara proved that treating employees well, investing in communities, and operating with integrity were not obstacles to success but foundations for it. The company's value tripled in 3 years, not despite these principles but because of them. Investors who had fled when Marcus was arrested came back, eager to be part of something that was both profitable and ethical. The board of directors, now diverse in every sense of the word, brought perspectives and connections that Marcus's homogeneous board had never possessed. Innovation flourished when different voices were heard and valued. The night before the 5th anniversary of the gala, Amara sat with Destiny in their penthouse apartment, looking out at the city lights. They talked about how far they had come, from a tiny apartment with peeling paint to this beautiful space with panoramic views. But more importantly, they talked about what they had learned. Destiny was starting her own company, focused on providing affordable legal services to small business owners who couldn't afford traditional corporate lawyers. She wanted to prevent what had happened to her grandfather from happening to others. Amara was proud of her daughter's commitment to justice, her understanding that privilege came with responsibility. They raised their glasses of champagne, toasting to Daniel Washington and all the others who had been crushed by corporate greed but whose spirits lived on in the work being done to prevent future injustices. On the 5th anniversary of the gala, Amara hosted another event at the Plaza Hotel. This time, it was a celebration of the entrepreneurs who had received funding and support from the Washington Foundation. The ballroom was filled with people who had built businesses from nothing, who had overcome obstacles that would have defeated most people, who were proof that talent and determination existed everywhere if given the opportunity to flourish. The keynote speaker was a young woman who had started a technology company with a grant from the foundation, growing it from a garage startup to a multimillion-dollar business that employed hundreds of people. She spoke about how Amara's story had inspired her to keep fighting when everyone told her to give up, how knowing that someone had faced worse and triumphed gave her the strength to persevere. The evening raised millions for the foundation, but more importantly, it created connections between entrepreneurs who would support each other long after the party ended. As the evening wound down, Amara stood on the same spot where she had been surrounded by mockers 5 years earlier. But now, instead of cruel laughter, she was surrounded by gratitude and respect. Someone asked her if she ever thought about forgiveness, if she could ever forgive Marcus and the others who had participated in her humiliation. She thought for a moment before answering that forgiveness was a personal journey, one that couldn't be forced or rushed. She had chosen to focus on justice and rebuilding rather than holding on to anger. Marcus was facing the consequences of his actions, and that was enough. She didn't need to forgive him to move forward with her life. She had transformed his cruelty into fuel for her success, his attempt to humiliate her into the catalyst for reclaiming her legacy. In a way, she said with a slight smile, she should thank him for the invitation to that gala. Without it, she might have spent years more gathering evidence, waiting for the perfect moment. His arrogance had provided that moment, his cruelty had sealed his fate. The title, Millionaire, invited the black cleaning lady as a joke, but she showed up like a diva and everyone would forever be part of corporate history, a cautionary tale about the dangers of arrogance and cruelty, and an inspiration to those fighting against injustice. Amara Washington had turned what was meant to be her humiliation into Marcus Sterling's destruction, had transformed pain into power, and had proven that true class had nothing to do with money and everything to do with character. She had shown up like a diva not because of the designer dress or the diamonds, but because she carried herself with the dignity of someone who knew their worth and refused to let anyone diminish it. The cleaning lady who had been invited as a joke had the last laugh, and it was the sound of justice finally being served. In the end, everyone learned that when you try to humiliate someone based on their race, their job, or their economic status, you reveal only your own inadequacy. And sometimes, just sometimes, the person you're trying to humiliate is playing a much longer, much smarter game than you could ever imagine. Amara Washington had won that game decisively, and in doing so, had changed the rules forever.